2 of his students complained and later dropped the class and then complained. After they dropped the class, they contacted the Simon Wiesenthal Center and the ADL, who apparently suggested that a formal complaint be submitted to the charges officer, claiming that Professor Robinson's email violated faculty codes of conduct. In these complaints, and especially in the Senate's handling of them, it is these complaints, and especially the Academic Senate's handling of them, that I want to discuss this evening. Regrettably, this matter has been handled so poorly that there are too many issues for me to discuss in the relevant amount of time. So I'll focus here on only the most glaring examples that we know of so far. As we hear of these problems, however, we should keep in mind the mantra we have heard whenever we have raised them in the past. We are told over and over again by Senate leaders and now by individuals outside of the university who side with the students that since a process has begun, we should just trust the process. In most cases, I would be inclined to follow that advice. Indeed, it is all too often that I am the one giving that advice to others who would prefer an alternative outcome. But for that advice to be meaningful, we need a set of complaints relevant for the charges officer, a committee to hear those charges that has been fairly composed, and a set of procedures that are beyond reproach. Sadly, the current situation falls short on all 3 counts. So when we hear someone say, trust in the process, we should respond with our own mantra. Give us a process that we can trust. As will become clear in the ensuing discussion, the irregularities in the procedures adopted by the charges officer are systematically biased against the accused faculty member. The failings of this committee cannot be excused as instances of mere sloppiness, and neither can they be attributed to an officer's attempt to find an informal resolution to the complaint, especially since none was attempted. Now that the Academic Senate has been made aware of the charges officer's repeated failures to fulfill his mandate, we request that the process begin anew. Let's consider what's happened so far. First, the charges officer departed significantly from the procedures he is mandated to follow in the Faculty Code of Conduct. According to it, before forming an advisory committee, the charges officer should refer the complainants to the department chair or dean. That's in the Faculty Code, revised section 4, page 2. This is so that an informal resolution can be attempted. Despite this, neither the chair of the sociology department nor the dean was contacted by the charges officer regarding this matter. In fact, the charges officer made no effort to resolve the complaint informally at all, or even seek the input of those most proximately responsible for the course and its content. For that matter, the students never contacted Professor Robinson, the chair, or the dean either. They headed straight for the charges officer to pursue their complaint in the most aggressive, confrontational manner possible. These choices have had considerable negative consequences. Instead of approaching this matter as an educational one, as an occasion for teaching and learning, with potential lessons for all concerned parties, the student's conduct and the charges officer's decision reinforced existing divisions by isolating the involved parties and setting them into direct conflict with one another, thereby making open dialogue and learning less likely. In every way, the use of the charges officer as the primary venue for handling student complaints regarding course content undermines the educational mission of this university. If the Academic Senate wants us to trust this process, they need to give us a process that we can trust. As an aside, let me respond to a charge made by Rabbi Gross Schaefer in today's newspaper. He chastised Professor Robinson for not reaching out to the offended students. He should know that the professor is virtually barred from doing so. Once a formal charge has been registered and an ad hoc committee has been formed, as in this case, no professor can contact the aggrieved students without knowing that the very fact he has done so will be treated as an admission of guilt and/or as an effort to tamper with the process. A second major concern is that the charges officer and his fellow committee members have failed to protect the rights of the accused, both with respect to the presentation of actual charges and in their failure to maintain the confidentiality of the committee meetings. Professor Robinson has been virtually excluded from meaningfully participating in the advisory committee's process because no set of coherent charges were presented to him after it had made its decision to pursue them. After receiving the complaints, the charges officer forwarded them to Professor Robinson and solicited a written response from him. The charges contained in the students' letters were copied straight from the Faculty Code of Conduct. They included a long list of charges from it, including those against romantic relations with students, despite the fact that the professor had never met the students in question, charges against the use of university property for commercial gain, and even the bizarre claim that he had violated his own academic freedom. Since these charges have no possible bearing whatever on the case, Professor Robinson repeatedly requested that the charges officer clarify the specific nature of the charges. The charges officer's failure to respond to those requests constitutes a direct failure of the violation of the Faculty Code of Conduct. Finally, when the charges officer did convey a specific set of charges some 50+ days later, he then claimed that the professor could no longer participate in the process because he had passed on his opportunity to do so. These actions can create an almost Kafkaesque process for the accused. It is a basic principle of justice that a person can defend him or herself only after specific allegations or charges have been made public. To request defense in anticipation of charges constitutes a fundamental perversion of even the most flexible and informal forms of due process, insofar as it allows subsequent charges to be crafted that do not relate to the defense on offer. This is not a fantasy in this case, because the charges officer has actually created out of whole cloth a set of facts and an additional charge, coercion of conscience, that do not appear anywhere in the student's complaints, and so could not have been defended against had the professor responded to the initial laundry list presented in the letters. In such a situation where a risk of charges has been presented, but no specific or formal charges have been made, no reasonable person can or should offer a defense, since any comments they provide can be used to facilitate the case against them. Because this sequence of actions, first charge, then defense, cannot be altered without undermining basic principles of fairness, they are actually encoded in a numbered series of steps in the Faculty Code of Conduct itself. Surely they could have been followed. As this case makes clear, this is not merely a case in which the charges officer departed from the procedures in an effort to resolve the complaint informally. Rather, his departure from procedure in the case so substantially altered the process that the accused faculty member could not meaningfully participate in it. Moreover, even though a lack of transparency in the process and its consequences were made clear to the charges officer, he repeatedly refused to respond to the accused professor to clarify what was happening. The kicker here is that while the charges officer and other Senate officials consistently ignored Professor Robinson's repeated requests for information, these same individuals managed to keep the university spokesperson fully informed every step of the way. In fact, Professor Robinson only learned about some of the steps in the process when the spokesperson's accounts were published in the newspaper. When a campus spokesperson knows more about a committee's actions than the accused does, we don't have to ask what this process is really about. When the leaders of the academic senate tell you to trust the process, you tell them, give us a process that we can trust. I only have a limited amount of time here, so let me mention a third and perhaps most glaring problem. The very committee charged with deciding whether the complaint was frivolous or not, the members of the very committee that was charged with finding whether the complaint was frivolous or not had a substantial and direct conflict of interest. Despite a long-time alliance with one of the parties to the complaint, this person not only participated in the decision-making process of this committee, but it